Hi guys, today I'm going to talk to you about what to do after you've propagated some plants. Here we have some Monstera siltibacana that we've propagated ourselves. When we propagate stuff, we propagate in a fine peat moss in our humidified controlled room. These are all being done by cuttings, all side shoots here, so there's no tips. So you can see, not 100% strike rate, but still quite good for what we want to do. So the first thing you want to do is fill up all your pots so your soil is ready to go. I do this fairly quickly. It's always good to have a good potting bench that's at a good height so you're not filling too much. Now when I'm packing here, I'm just doing a light pack in the pot. I'm not jamming the soil in because I don't want to have it completely jammed full of peat. And this is our 100% peat moss mix as well. So I just go through and fill up until I've got a full tray, 15. Now when you finish off and you plant, you do make a little bit more of a mess, and then when you finally do your final watering, that flattens it off and gives you a nice smooth result. See here, I've got my 15. Now for this size pot, we use 1/4 teaspoon of fertiliser. This is just a 6-month slow release. And we just push it down into the middle of the pot. Doesn't have to be terribly deep. Just in there, like so. One more. So that's our soil ready to go so we can plant into it. Then once you've got that, bring your tray back over, and I've just got a little dibble stick. This just helps get as much of it out as I can without damaging the roots. If I was just to pull it out, there's potential I could rip some of the roots off, and I want to try and hold on to as much of that as possible. So I just dibble that out, and then, so you can see, nice happy roots there growing away. And then we just pop in. Now I'd give it a slight pinch. I try and keep the same level going as what we had in our prop tray. Now while I'm doing this, I'm making sure that everything does have some nice roots on it. You don't want to just plant a bare rooted cutting because it just won't survive. Now always when you are propagating and like this, you will get a varying result depending on the age of the stock that you've taken your cuttings from. So if it's really old woody cuttings, you'll have a slower result. If it's nice and sort of fresh, you should get a fairly even result when you're propagating. Couple more to go. Now I try and keep them fairly centre in the pot. It's obviously up to you, but for presentation and my habits is keep it nice and centred. So they're ready to be off and given a water in. Okay, so we're just going to quickly show you here how we water in. Now I like to go a nice little gentle spray through. I might even drop that down a little bit more. I'm being careful not to flush that soil out, but I do want to give it a nice sort of thorough water. Okay, so as you can see here, the soil is nice and moist. What you want to try and avoid is putting a fresh cutting into dry potting mix and not wetting it, because especially peat is very dry and it absorbs water out of everything. So if you put a fresh cutting in there and you haven't really watered in your soil, it will absorb that moisture away from your cutting, drying it out and putting it into stress. So making sure when you first pot up is your soil is nice and moist but not soaking wet. So we have a couple of Monsteras here that we've done previously. This one is about 4 or 5 weeks old, and this one is about 8 to 9 weeks old. Now I'm just going to pop this guy out. Now what we like to see here is a bit of root growth coming through the soil out to the edge of the pot. That's a great sign. It means it's rooting out into the soil that we've potted it in, and it's going to be growing, be nice and established quite well. Now this one here, with these vining plants, it's great to have a little ladder behind it to give it some direction up, because if you just leave that in the tray growing, these area roots here will sink into the pot next to it and will start attaching into the plant next to it. And if you've got a full tray of plants, it can be quite tricky then to untangle it. So the little ladder at the back here just gives it a bit of, somewhere to go, so it's not growing into its little neighbours. And if we have a look at the root system on this guy, careful not to lose that ladder. Look at that nice little roots all the way to the bottom of the pot, out to the edge. Fine in there. It's a happy little plant. I hope you enjoyed that. Please feel free to leave any comments, any questions. Always happy to answer and help out with some advice where we can.